to whom will you compare me? Or who is my equal? Says the Holy One. You see, these people back then had tried to create idols, obviously. But God is saying, whoa, 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 whoa. Absolutely nothing can compare to me in nature. There is nothing besides me. I am the one. I'm the only one. There is no other one that is equal to me. There is nothing that is absolutely equal to me. We look further down in verse 8, and we see that God tells Israel and Jacob that, no, there is no other rock. I know not one. He tells us that in the latter part of verse 8. There's no other firm basis of faith. There's absolutely nothing that we can put our true faith in and fully trust in. There's absolutely nothing. I mean, can we grasp that this morning? That there is nothing in this world that we can fully trust. Nothing. We live in a fallen world, and we will fail. As we take a look at verses 9 through 14, we see that the Word gives us a description of those who made idols and how they make them. As you can see in verse 9, we see how God views these people that make these idols. All who make idols are nothing, and the things they treasure are worthless. Those who would speak up for them are blind. They are ignorant to their own shame. And these people that created these idols, they thought that they were creating something grand. They thought that they were creating something fantastic. But the fact of the matter is they weren't. But they were completely blind to that because they're making these idols and they're creating them. And they're trying to shape them and form them into something that they think that they can trust and that will take care of them, that will save them. But they're completely blind to that fact and they're blind to that stupidity. They are blind to the fact that they are putting something completely above God that does not need to be put there. As we move further down in the text, we can look at the second half of verse 12. And we can see that these men focused all of their attention and time to the making of these idols. Now, I know on the screen it says in verse 12 that they used wood. That is a typo. As you can see in verse 12, it talks about the blacksmith who takes a tool and works with it and forms with the iron this idol. So in verse 12, you have blacksmith using iron, which is a premium material during that time, and that is critical for survival, and forming it into an idol that they think that they can bow down to and worship. And as we look down to verse 13, again, in verse 13 and on the screen it says the idols makers used iron. But in verse 13 they actually use wood. And we can see that the text talks about the carpenter who measures with a line. And he makes outlines with it. And the carpenter takes chisels and works with a piece of wood delicately and tries to form this thing into the glory of a man. And they take their time and they just work with it and they keep trying to form it until they think it's just right and that it's just perfect. And as we go down to verse 14, verse 14 says, he cut down cedars, or perhaps took a cypress or oak. He let it grow among the trees of the forest, or planted a pine, and the rain made it grow. Now, why do we want to go over this? Well, it is because that those forms of wood, that cedar, cypress, and oak, and pine, those forms of wood are premium woods. They were used ultimately during this time for the purpose of cooking with food and other things of that nature, and creating tents so that they can have coverage and shelter during the night. And even today, these forms of wood are still premium materials. But instead, they took these premium materials, these high-quality materials that God placed on this earth, and formed an idol. It formed an idol that they thought that they could bow down to and that they can worship. As we look at verses 15 through 17, we can see how God reveals to us the stupidity of making these idols from such premium materials. These materials are also needed in order for people to live their daily lives. The people that partook in the idolatry made these statues from things that kept them warm at night. And we can see that in verse 15. The first half of it, it says, "It is man's fuel for burning. Some of it he takes and warms himself, in order so that they will be able to survive the cold." They also use the materials to make food with them in verse 16. The first half of verse 16 says, "Half of the wood he burns in the fire. Over it he prepares a meal. He roasts his meat and eats his fill." So they're taking these materials and they're using them for the ultimate purpose. They're using them for the correct usage. But something goes utterly wrong. As we look at verse 17, we see how these very same people that took these materials and used them for the correct usage, they completely misused them. Just completely misused them. Verse 17 says, "From the rest he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships it. He prays to it and says, 'Save me, you are my God.'" So if you can just picture for just a second, I'm going to use my little idol thing here, my little cup. These people are praying to it. They are bowing down to it. They are worshiping it. They are praising it. Now, as y'all look up here at me, y'all thinking, that guy must be stupid. He's bowing down to a foam cup. But that's what those people were doing. They're doing that exact same thing, except they are blind to that fact. Instead of focusing on God, they're wanting to focus on something that is physical, that they can feel, that they can touch, that they can literally see with their eyes, instead of trusting in the things that are unseen. People who worshipped idols back then, and even still worship them today, still cannot see that they are created from resources that are placed on this earth with different intended purposes. God placed the numerous resources that are here. There are numerous resources that are here on this earth. We have coal that we use for electricity. We have our cattle that we use for food. We have trees that we use for furniture and that we use to make fire for when we go camping and we cook our food. But these people were taking these resources and again misusing them. And the sad thing is they're blind to that fact. As we take a look at verses 18 through 20, we see how God discusses the nature of the people who take part in idol worship. Here we can see clearly that we live in a fallen world. These people are blinded by the world's standards and things created by their own hands. And you can see that is very evident in verse 18, which says, "They know nothing, they understand nothing. Their eyes are plastered over so they cannot see, and their minds are closed so they cannot understand." They're so caught up in worshiping these idols that they can't see that the very thing that they are doing is foolish. They can't see it. They're blinded. Satan has caught their vision, and he's using this idol to blind them. And they can't comprehend, because they're so caught up in this worship, they can't comprehend God. And with that, These people are mentally blocked by their fascination with these detailed carvings